Welcome, Spartans, to Podcast Evolved, your favorite Halo podcast. I am your host, Krista, and with me today is Oren.
Hey, everyone.
David.
Hello, everybody.
And someone very super special. Today we have Halo Canon, aka Ian, aka Toa Freak. Hello.
Hey there, great to be on.
I know, it's fun stuff, so exciting. So this is our lore episode. So for this week's lore, we will cover artificial intelligence, so human, Forerunner, Covenant, all the crazy artificial peoples. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that you know about our website, halopodcast.com, and our fantastic, amazing, super awesome patrons. Oh my gosh. Thank you all so much. We love you. There is so many of you, so thank you all. Thank you so much. If you are interested in looking into our Patreon, you get a lot of cool stuff, episodes early, rewards, all that fun stuff. It is patreon.com/halopodcastevolved. So, thank you to our current patrons, and thank you to our future patrons. I know you're out there.
Subtle.
I know, right? So, this week is our artificial intelligence lore topic. I'm going to throw it over to Oren to introduce us to some of the human AIs.
Yes. So, we'll be talking about human AI, Covenant AI, and Forerunner AI throughout the episode today, and just kind of give you guys an idea of, maybe the different types, different important figures, maybe some that are still relevant right now, and we'll kind of wrap it up and see where AI is going to go into Infinite, because if those of you that played Halo 5, there's a pretty massive cliffhanger that involves the kind of AI's place in the galaxy, and so we'll get to that. But first, humanity, just like the real world, we have artificial intelligence and AIs doing computing and processing, so it's the same sort of functionality, it's just developed and heightened, and so we do our complicated tasks or our simple tasks with our Google Assistants and our Cortana devices and Siri and all that kind of stuff. And so the UNSC being, or Halo being sci-fi, all that kind of stuff, it's just really built up. So they're specifically just programs designed to do specific functions and other sort of tasks on behalf of humanity. And the development of it is kind of split into two main categories. There is also a third one which we'll touch that I didn't know about until I looked into all this. But we have our dumb AIs and we have our smart AIs. And our dumb AIs aren't dumb by any means, but that's just more of a coined term of just very specific. They're designed to do kind of a certain process, like they can do tutorial programs, they can do military operations, they can do infrastructure for like cities and stuff, so we get that with like the superintendent from New Mombasa, and so they're very smart within their limitations, so they're not ever expanding and they don't really learn on their own, and that's where kind of the distinction becomes to the smart AIs, where they do kind of consume knowledge and they're able to perform a multitude of tasks and kind of think for themselves, and they do have feelings and thoughts and their own mannerisms and stuff like that, and that's because of just how they're created, which is by copying the neural structure of a human brain, and this process is known as cognitive impression modeling. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is Cortana and Halsey like really one of the only instances where a brain is taken when the host is still alive? Because usually it's when brain
it's the only documented one in the canon.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a donor brain is given when a person dies to be created, as opposed to like Halsey flash cloning her own brain and using it to make this, which I actually love. I think that's just so fucking cool.
I almost feel like
I love myself so much I need two of me.
That's exactly what it says, though. Like, that's what she feels. She's like, who's better at this than me? Do you know what I mean? I might as well.
I don't know if I'd say she loves herself so much.
Well, no, but like,
she's like, I need more people like me to do all these complicated tasks. I'm just gonna clone my brain to do all these things.
If I only had two more arms. Oh wait.
So these AIs again crop up throughout the Halo lore and do all sorts of information gathering. They're able to decide things for themselves and analyze and have very human-like characteristics.
They're real characters in some of the stories, and even have their own stories dedicated to them, and they come across really well.
And like I think Isabel is another good example of a more modern AI that probably has been shown like kind of the most human emotion in kind of the more recent AIs that have kind of come out. So like the leaps that AIs are kind of developing is almost to the point where it's kind of scary, which is where it kind of leads into. Another factor that smart AIs can do is that they can split into multiple fragments, which is something that Cortana's done a few times actually. So then they can kind of process multiple things and do different tasks by kind of fragmenting themselves and isolating themselves to do those specific tasks before kind of coming together and bringing everything else together. The kind of third part type of AI is what they call a micro AI, and it seemed to be more of an experimental process that the UNSC developed back prior to 2529, and they're designed to, how it's described, is to fit into a pea-sized data chip. So I'm just kind of thinking like smaller than like a USB that you can just kind of carry around and use at personal computers and hotspots, compared to dumb and smart AIs where you need a much larger like data chip that might be the size of like a wallet or something. So then that can go into like data centers and onboard ship AIs, and then even the power armors with the Master Chief and stuff. And these micro AIs are still quite smart and capable of thinking like a personal computer, but their design was to be, I guess, more transportable to kind of put elsewhere. So we have an example later on of one micro AI that Catherine Halsey used. But I guess I missed that short story that person was in. Let's see. So one thing that's big for smart AIs is rampancy, and rampancy gets into that we kind of touched upon this in Halo 4 with Cortana, but an AI has estimated about 7 years of life because it starts going rampant, which is essentially where the AI just consumes so much knowledge that it starts running out of storage. And so in order to make room for the new knowledge that it's consuming, it starts deleting smaller programs until it eventually deletes programs that it can no longer function on. And a good kind of comparison that this is kind of compared to, it's as if you consumed so much knowledge that you forgot the knowledge of how to breathe, so then your body stops breathing and then you suffocate and die.
That happens to me sometimes.
Yeah, so you got to watch out for that.
Oh, wow, that got dark, Orange.
It gets very dark. Essentially, the AI is thinking so much, creating all these new neural pathways in its matrix, and then as it fills up on space, it's trying to delete the old data. It's basically chipping away at its own operating system until, like you said, it can't operate anymore.
And sometimes it's as simple as it just stops working, but then you also get AIs that then start outraging and kind of doing things for themselves and not thinking, quote unquote, clearly. And so we kind of, again, saw a little bit of this visually with Cortana in Halo 4, where she kind of had outbursts and would scream and all this kind of stuff. And that was her individual case of kind of dealing with her ever-growing kind of brain. And she's been consuming so much Forerunner knowledge over the past 7 years that it takes a lot of weight on you. But every AI is different. Some are able to handle it a little bit better than others, and so it's unique. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit with some of the other AIs that are still active, that have been active for longer than 7 years.
And actually, if you don't mind me jumping in quickly,
by all means.
One thing I think that's probably important to note: the 7-year lifespan thing. Like you said, it's basically an average of. For the sake of your viewers, it's basically an average of when AIs start to break down. So it's not necessarily the case that an AI will break down or even enter rampancy at 7 years of life. But there's essentially a kill switch in AI that just terminates them at 7 years. so that they don't undergo rampancy.
Right. So that's, I think, after the UNSC developed that, and I think it's I have it here. It's the Riemann matrix.
Yes, there it is.
So it's a matrix that's integrated into the framework of the AI, and yeah, like you said, it's like a fail-safe. And after 7 years before the AI is kind of gets to that tipping point, the humans can activate it or automatically activate it, and it destroys the AI before the rampancy can even begin or likely get out of control. And I feel like Serena might be a good example that did she either activate the matrix herself, or might have been automatically activated when
she activated it herself.
Yeah, it showed her doing it.
And so when she was the AI, of course, on the Spirit of Fire. So after everyone went into cryosleep at the end of Halo Wars 1, they were asleep for 30 years, and so a couple years into that cycle, she activated her own matrix, had a nice little farewell speech that we got to listen to in Halo Wars 2, and is again just kind of the example of how the AIs are kind of kept in check for the potential harm that they may cause to either one another or even to other sort of processes and programs. So there's one thing that I wanted to get more info on, but I discovered the Assembly, which is a secret group of human AIs that kind of came together, and they were essentially monitoring the development of other AIs as well as the human race. And from the Halo Reach datapads, we've known that they've been active since as early as 2310, and kind of up until the Human Covenant War, and then kind of fizzled out. But Ian, are you a little bit more familiar with this topic?
Yeah.
Do you want to chime in on maybe some interesting tidbits? Because I meant to look into it a little bit more, but kind of ran out of time.
Is this what Saint's testimony was?
No,
Okay.
But although a lot of people did hope that there would be some connective tissue there, so far that hasn't played out. But yeah, as you said, the Assembly is this gathering of AI. It is an assembly of AI. We know that their structure includes various subcommittees. It's essentially a lot like Congress or a parliament, where you have a bunch of representatives and they all have their committees that do certain things. And as you said, it's operated from at least 2310 up to 2552, though it's important to note that the membership has changed. These are all smart AI as far as we've been able to tell, so they're not immune to rampancy or anything. But they work in the background and try to guide humanity towards, I guess you could say, the optimal outcome, keep them safe, but make sure that they're able to rise to the occasion, to be better.
And not kind of destroy themselves.
Yeah, not destroy themselves.
There's some similar themes there between that and maybe like the mantle and what the creator.
Oh yes, very much so.
I'm loving that, the wording.
When the datapads were first discovered, there was actually quite a bit of debate about whether or not these AI were human or Forerunner. Obviously now we know they are human. But yeah, it has a lot of parallels to certain things that have come up in the Reclaimer saga and under 343's care of the lore. Lost my words there. But the other big thing about the Assembly that stands out to me is, along with their committees, there's always a majority and minority, and obviously I'm going to assume that membership changes based on the topic. The majority rules, minority files its complaints, stuff like that. So those are two big groups you'll always read about if you ever go through and read all the data pads. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. It's actually heavily implied that, no, it's not implied. What am I saying? It's actually it's pointed out that an AI of the Assembly reached out to the Covenant, or reached out to an AI of the Covenant. And so one of the Assembly basically may have caused the Human Covenant War.
Oh shit!
But the AI is just like when the AI in turn went on trial, and its justification was, humanity, it's not going to grow if it doesn't encounter something like this. It's going to stagnate, and then it might be even worse off when first contact happens naturally. So it's
Oh,
Now-
interesting. I like the idea that they're instigating like a culling or like a joint enemy as a way of bringing humanity together.
yeah,
or just
Yep,
or just
very
a
much so.
situation that requires drastic,
Cooperation,
yeah,
yeah.
and like unification. I've
and
definitely seen that themes in other mediums before, other stories.
Yeah, yeah.
and it's really what always it really like it just kind of clicked for me now as we were talking about this. It's like one of the most interesting things about Halo is like within the lore is how perfectly timed the Spartan 2 program was. It was originally created for to deal with human rebellion, but right as the project came into its own in 2525, that's when the Covenant showed up. And since this assembly was very much aware of the Spartan 2 program, that kind of takes out the coincidence from that. And,
Yeah, kind of raises an
Yeah.
eyebrow.
yeah. It's like
Now,
this AI might have seen, hey, the Spartans are ready. Well, I detected this weird signal. And gonna go reach out to it, I guess.
That's
yeah.
so cool.
So when I first stumbled upon this, I was like, I need to learn more about this. This is very interesting, because it was also one of the earlier documentations of kind of early AI, kind of before 2525, because there's not too much information that I was able to find, in terms of
Yeah.
quote unquote history, and so that's kind of the oldest type of information that we have. That it's but I mean it kind of makes sense given humanity's natural evolution, just kind of starting from kind of taking from where we are, like I kind of said at the top of the segment, just we kind of build our way from personal assistance, and it just naturally grows as technology develops.
Yep.
So let's see. So next we have some notable smart and dumb AIs that I've kind of just picked out that kind of spoke to me that you can kind of learn more about by reaching out to the individual storylines of where these characters have been throughout the lore, and then also any sort of potential character that we may have an impact later into the the present Halo timeline. So we start with the second gen. Like I said, Serena earlier. She's kind of a much earlier smart AI aboard the Spirit of Fire, and predominantly see her in Halo Wars 1. And I found her being a very strong character and really enjoyable to kind of communicate with. Felt very natural after playing the mainline Halo games. Kind of you have your Cortana in your head.
Oh, yeah, you have to have a blue lady.
Yeah, you have to have a blue lady talking in your head. So, so it was very great to kind of have her alongside you and the other characters in Halo Wars, kind of playing through that. Then Gen 3, we have Cortana. And so she came into service at 2549, and then presumably, died in 2556, although, was able to kind of come back and cure herself, as she claims. Iona is Iona?
Iona.
Iona, the AI from Spartan Black Team, that was assigned to their kind of unit, as they kind of did their secret Black Ops, background operations. Araquel, she is the Colonel Ackerson's personal AI, and I wanted to just highlight him because of just how his like back and forth with Cortana kind of goes throughout the lore, and so I don't know, I just thought it was interesting.
I do think it's funny that like Cortana just fucks with this guy all the time.
Yeah.
And like she just
She
totally
is
has
based off Dr. Halsey's.
Yeah, yeah. She bears the grudge. That part survived the cloning process.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
But it's also just like these AIs are people's essential like virtual personal assistants.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have Cortana with Catherine Halsey. Next in the fourth generation, you have Black Box, who is the personal assistant for Admiral Paragoski and Admiral Osman in charge of Oni, and so they're just alongside these individuals and just kind of partners and stuff. But Black Box is interesting because he came into service in 2552. And he's, as far as we know, still around and kind of in hiding with some other AIs. And, you know, in the present timeline anyway, he's reaching that point to where rampancy would be a risk, kind of in his situation. So I think he's a big asterisk to kind of see, do we see more of him in Infinite or just in other mediums, and to kind of see if it's just a transition or if there's kind of bigger ramifications that may have, because Black Box might be one of the...
Oh, I really hope you get
Like-
more of BB, because the end of that storyline of where he is now is so interesting, and like he was such a great character. Like he really was a great character in like the Kilo 5 trilogy is where the bulk of his content is, and he's great. Like I think he's fantastic. And
I found him to be okay in Kilo 5. What really stood out for me was him in Hunt the Truth. When he was voiced by, I can't remember the gentleman's name. He's a British actor.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I always forget that. That was an awesome reveal when he came.
Yes,
into
it
that.
was, and I loved the voice casting for him in that because it was perfect.
Well, even the cliffhanger, I think the last piece that we have seen him as well as Osman was Rossbach's World.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's her, him, and then is it Lord Hood?
Yep.
And so they're kind of maroons in light of the Guardians activating, and it's just literally like, all right, we'll put a pause and we'll come back to it once we know more. So BB's definitely going to be someone that we keep an eye on.
Yeah. I hope we get a little more story with him.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. So then we also have Governor Sloan. He was in Halo 5, and I think we know that he's siding with Cortana, and he's also a much older AI coming in from 2549. So
actually, there's some contention about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because Halo 5 does speculate that he's 9 years old, but Halo Retribution says that the mind that was used to make him died in 2551.
Ooh.
Let's see here. I had it pulled up. Okay, so Jonas Sladwall, real name Johansson Sloan. He died in 2551 during the Battle of Meridian and became the basis for Admin Sloan. So he might actually have only been 7 years old, but I guess like people, it was kind of like a company secret. So I guess people were kind of skeptical about, or weren't entirely sure about how old he actually was. So,
but he was definitely degrading when we met.
Oh yeah,
him.
he definitely he definitely was. He was one way or another. He was on the verge of rampancy, but might not have been as old as Halo 5 led them to believe.
Yeah, leads us to.
I don't know if like there was, I don't know what happened there. Like if they had that idea around the entire time, or if some changes were made by the time Retribution came around. Who knows?
That's interesting. I never copped that. I don't remember, but I remember like when you played the mission in the game, and like all the kind of people don't seem to care that he's rampant. They're very defensive of him. Do you know what I mean? I like that of like they're covering for this rampant AI that they rely on so much, and they're just like, no, he's one of us. Doesn't matter that he's going rampant.
Well, it could be. It also could be from their point of view. His rampancy could be so gradual that they just may not be fully aware of it as well.
Like they are aware. Like there are moments when they're talking about it. Yeah, they actually talk about it in the game if you go around and talk to the people around there. Or maybe it's talked about at some point in the game. I can't remember exactly when, but they basically say, but it's like, it's a little weird how he looks these days, but his mind is still all there, and that's what matters to us. And honestly, I think it's just an extension of kind of like, if you go to a small town, everybody's very tight knit, and so Meridian's kind of the same way, like that, being considering where it is in the lore right now, with all these people being hired by this company, Liang Dortmund, to prepare it for recolonization. Is we actually also got kind of a similar look at with an AI named Juliana, another smart AI in Halo: The Cole Protocol, where like she was very clearly beyond her operational range, but she was able to do her job, and there was just kind of this connection between her and the people of this asteroid colony called the Rubble at the time. There's a lot
She
of
was
context
great,
to it.
actually. Now I remember that. Yeah,
Yes, yeah. So,
she had a great arc.
mhm.
Do we think we'll see him again?
Sloane?
I
Yeah.
don't know. I hope so. I'd be interested to see him. Like he'd be a fun maybe mini boss for Blue Team to fight
Oh,
against
yeah.
in Infinite or Chief to go up against, I should say, in Infinite, since Blue Team's still iffy. But maybe you could have a brief like Osiris or Locke cameo, and it's like this bastard screwed
Yeah,
with
well-
us on Meridian. Let's go get him, Chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see, or at least cropping up in some like a short story or something like that.
Mhm.
I think
That'd be nice.
I think he's a great, more like novel character. Very easy for that sort of medium for him to come back in.
Absolutely.
Something I forgot to mention, going back up to Iona, I forgot her name. Iona is that she's actually the AI that's in Saint's Testimony, the short story. And I
Yes.
recommend anyone who's who hasn't read that one to read that, because it talks about the kind of debriefing that the AIs go to right before they're terminated.
In her case, she was actually she was petitioning for to not be terminated right away. Like she was like, "Let me live out the rest of my life naturally," or something along those lines.
Yeah, she was petitioning for like human rights. Wasn't
That
it?
was
It's
it. Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
like that was it. So,
That
which
was
is,
really
like,
interesting.
That's always interesting in a
And the-
world like where you have such advanced AI that in the games we kind of just take it for granted that they seem like they're treated like humans, but even in the games they're still treated like equipment. It just kind of passes you over.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good observation.
you get to see individuals treat them, but I think that's great to see, like, because we'll probably talk about it in a little bit, like the differences between how the factions treat their AI, and that humans quite naturally, when they created these things literally from themselves, grow very attached to the personalities, and we obviously are great at like humanizing and giving. Oh, there's a term for it, and I can't remember what it is, but giving human traits to non-human things.
Anthropomorphizing, I think it is.
There's that beautiful word. Thanks for that, Ian. Essentially, like, we love to do this. We're programmed to do it, and I think that's great. You can obviously see, like, obviously Chief and Cortana's relationship is very complex, and how the other AIs interact with like human people is always really cool. So I love to see more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to kind of wrap up some of these last few AIs, then we can move on to some of the other factions. But we have Isabel, who's on board the Spirit of Fire. She was commissioned in 2556, so she still has some pretty good time on her. Same thing with Roland, who's on the UNSC Affinity. He was from 2557, going
So
strong.
definitely a character we'll see again.
Yes, I'm quite
I'll be
certain.
disappointed if he disappears.
Roland will definitely be around, and then Isabel maybe not so much in Infinite, but I'm sure the Spirit of Fire story will continue in some fashion.
Yes.
Some notable dumb AIs. We have Deja, who was kind of the Spartan teacher for the kids for the Spartan 2 program, kind of teaching them history and tactics. We have the superintendent from the ODST Halo 3 game. The superintendent was kind of the infrastructure AI for New Mombasa, and kind of did like the trash service and traffic lights, kind of stuff like that, which I think is very interesting, just from like a city point of view. Just like you have all the
Those
infrastructure.
computers took all those jobs.
Yeah, just yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I was playing what is it, a City Skylines a couple months ago, and like you have to think about infrastructure, and you're basically a city manager and stuff like that. And when I was,
And you were just playing the superintendent game.
exactly, that's what it is. I was playing the superintendent. I was like, I can control literally everything. So it's poor union workers.
Oof.
That's all I gotta say.
Yeah.
Topical for the Flood novel we're all reading, we have Wellesley, who's the Class C military AI that primarily helped McKay and the I forget his name. Who was McKay's superior?
Antonio Silva.
Silva, yeah.
Major Antonio Silva.
And so Silva and McKay kind of assisted them on their alpha base operations on Installation 04.
And since you were talking about it earlier, he also guided Fireteam Raven through their missions.
Oh, cool.
Right, yes. And then we have Auntie Dot with the Noble Team that kind of provided them with strategic intelligence throughout their missions during the Fall of Reach. And like I mentioned earlier, we had Gerard, who is the micro AI that assisted Halsey as early as 2529. And it looked like he was still around actually when I was looking up some of my notes that I guess dumb AIs don't have any sort of risk of rampancy, so they're for the most part they're able to stick around as long as they're needed. Essentially,
as long as their program holds up.
Yeah, as long as their software doesn't need to be updated.
I wonder, will we see a whole slew of them come into play now that we can no longer rely on smart AIs?
It'll be interesting. Gerard's a very interesting case in and of itself, though, because he's in Ghosts of Onyx. And then the book that follows up on that, Glasslands, he just disappears. He got destroyed, but he doesn't get destroyed in Ghosts of Onyx, and he's actually there, helping Halsey as soon as they enter this shield world that they eventually get rescued from. So
Halsey just yeets him off a cliff.
It seems like, yeah. That's certainly what the lore did.
He's just kicking around in Onyx somewhere. Somebody will pick him up someday.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on human AI before we move on to the Forerunners?
Traitors.
Potentially interesting one. Oh,
Traitors.
I don't want to reduce it that simply. I hope they can do something interesting in Infinite to explore this, because there's a lot of comparisons with Halo 5 to your typical AI or robot takeover of human society.
Yeah.
But I think something that differentiates Halo's take on it, besides the fact that they're not trying to destroy humanity or kill humanity, they want to make it better, unfortunately through force. But not every AI, gave in to Cortana's ideals. Certainly, Roland didn't. We had an AI on the Ark. What's his name? The Curator, who didn't give in. He wasn't offered, but he was definitely aware of what was going on. So, and he was an end of life AI too. So it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm hoping we get a very gray look at AI.
It is something that I think is one of the more items that need to kind of be developed into Infinite, because as of now, it's mostly just here's my proposal, do it or you'll be met with force, and then we kind of get people making their allegiance or being wishy-washy about it, but we really haven't seen any of the repercussions, beyond just the Guardian firing. It's still very it's not complex. It's not three-dimensional. It's very one-dimensional right now.
We haven't got a lot of content from post
right.
This,
That's what I mean. So I think when Infinite comes out, I think it really this topic will need to definitely be monitored, because I feel like it's the absolute time to really develop that and to kind of see where it goes and how it's unique to Halo and maybe different from other mediums like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, all I'll say is it is the personalities that make the AIs on the human side so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't wait to see a bit of AI versus AI action. What does that look like when Roland final throwdown with Cortana and they're just yellow and blue fighting each other? I imagine Tron bicycles going around the track or something.
You remember we had Isabel doing kind of a little bit of that in Halo Wars 2, where she was kind of combating the Ark's kind of infrastructure to then eject, or to combat all the Sentinels. Am I remembering that right?
But she just fired the I can't remember the name of the ship right now, but the CAS class assault carriers glassing beams straight at the Ark, in order to get the Sentinels to attack it.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
Okay. Anyway, it was an interesting representation, David. What I was getting at, that I think kind of plays a little bit to what you would love to see a little bit more of. So,
well, I mean, they're gonna have to do something because we're gonna talk about it a little bit later. But like, how does John fight Cortana? How do we fight AIs other than just us? If it's just humans fighting robots,
yeah.
Hopefully, I think Halo will do a better job of
And
not
just Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
So, David, tell us about the Forerunners.
Sure. I won't spend as long going into that because most of this stuff is all ancient history, and a lot of it isn't as relevant now as it would be. But essentially, Forerunner is obviously a massive society, very technologically advanced, and they did a lot of their stuff with what they called ancillas, which is their word for essentially an artificial intelligence. And they had several classes in the same way that humanity did, that did various different functions. But they seem to have had way more of them than humanity ever did, where they had them almost integrated into their suits that they wore, and that was like a personal assistant that did everything for you, that gave you access to the domain, that like facilitated any of your interactions with like
basically a personal assistant, but every one of them's on the
for
level
life.
of Cortana.
Yeah, and they have like small personalities, but like they never named their ancillas and stuff like that. They had a very different relationship. Like Forerunners did absolutely look at their ancillas as tools and not sentient beings. So you have different relationships there. But the kind of major ones that are really kind of notable to talk about is the contender class AIs, which are like, these are the mega AIs, and there is not a lot of them because they're so powerful. So you've probably heard of them anyway. So that we had like obviously well, I won't skip too far ahead, but let's just say they also had a way of integrating a lot of ancillas together in a network, and they called that a matriarchy. So that's just pretty much where like one big AI coordinates the actions of all other AIs. So when you have a galaxy spanning empire, you need this kind of level to manage it. So like superintendent times 1 billion is what you got to think about here. So we got some crazy ass AI. So, but essentially, what is very interesting that there was no notion of an ancilla rebelling against their masters. It was unheard of. It only changed when the Flood's logic plague could actually infect and convert foreign AIs. So I love that idea of how something organic fights something digital, and the fact that it corrupts it through like logic is just, I struggle to wrap my brain around it, but it's cool. But it is it's a cool concept. You get the real sense of it. And there's a story called, I think it's just called Cortana, and I think it's in Evolutions.
Human
and it's
weakness.
Human weakness. That's the one. Sorry,
yeah.
It is just how the Grave Mind spends his time corrupting and tormenting Cortana when she's left behind after Halo 2.
Yep.
And it's so cool, and it's just so eerie, and that really gets around the concept of how the Flood does what they did. And what they did, which is they pretty much corrupted the major AI of the Forerunners, and it turned against the Forerunners, and then that started the whole side of the Forerunners losing the Flood War, essentially. But anyway, we won't go too deep into that. So some of the obvious ones that are to note and that are still, I think, relevant. The big one being 343 Guilty Spark. So he was a monitor of Installation 04. So
Heavy breathing.
here we go. I was waiting for Krista to chime back in. So Guilty Spark has had an amazing arc from his origin.
You finally
to
admit it, you son of a bitch.
I mean, he's one of the few characters that I think we're going to highlight as its own episode, because he not only has such an amazing character, but I feel like he also has a lot to potentially continue to do.
Can we find the voice filter, and we'll all have the voice filter on the entire episode?
Sure. So how kind of Foreigners built their eyes were kind of slightly different. We don't know as much about it as we do by humans, but one way they did do it was to actually take a human consciousness and use it to create what the monitors. I don't know if every monitor was created this way.
Yeah. Most likely not, because there were definitely a bunch of active monitors within, like, in Forerunner Society.
Before humanity even came on board, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, I just, like, we see a bunch of them in Halo Cryptum, and I have my doubts that all of them were created from a once organic mind, human or otherwise. 343 Guilty Spark, I think, and potentially the other monitors of the Halo array.
The rings installations, yeah.
Yeah, of the other installations, but obviously that's just a fan theory. Was an exception rather than the rule.
Right. So his character is essentially still kicking around. So Kelly Gay's stories have kind of brought him back into the fold of from a monitor to an actual disembodied AI to actually rebuilding himself in the body of a soldier, of a Promethean soldier, who is now pretty much on board with, well, helping humanity. He also has kind of some of his own motivations, but he's such a cool character and is in such a cool place. So we have to see more of him.
He also has a great redemption arc.
Yeah.
Yes. To the ages. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah, no, there's definitely something cooking up in his sort of path.
Yeah. So we'll probably see some more of that. We have 031 Exuberant Witness, who's the monitor of Genesis, and probably one of our new favorite monitors. So she's great at the end of Halo 5. She's a great little character. I don't know if we'll ever see her again, or how important Genesis will be. Yeah, but we'll see what happens there. Actually, Genesis' original purpose was to create kind of shield worlds, so maybe that does become important. Anyway. Intrepid Eye is another one. He's a character from Troy Denning's books. He was an Archeon class in Scylla. His function was to protect a specific support base.
Intrepid Eye was female.
She. Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry, apologies. Yeah. And on Gao. And essentially, she interacted with Blue Team and Veda's team. And we've seen her. It's interesting to see like how an AI infects Spartan armor, and that's something we all kind of feared, and you can see the Spartans feared even when their first interactions with Cortana and other AIs. And you typically don't see a lot of Spartans with AIs, even though that's what they were originally built with the Mjolnir with. But anyway, she, goddammit, is
her as long as you admit you'll fold.
I know, I'm all over the place. Her story is cool.
She's gonna come after you, David.
Yeah, maybe. We don't really know where she is, so she was on Argent Moon, and that was destroyed at the beginning of like Halo 5, but we don't actually know how she escaped, where she is now.
She's fucking around with someone.
She is fucking around, but this is another AI that's pretty much decided that it's going to better humanity, and it's very aggressive in how she goes about doing it. So I think she's 100% going to be in Cortana's boat, but we'll kind of see what happens there. The big one is what's called Medicant Bias. So this character is incredibly complex, as story arcs over multiple places, and pretty much ends. And for me, where I first came across this character was the Halo 3 terminals, and it's also where his story ends. So this is like the Uber contender class AI that was created essentially to monitor all of the military assets of the Forerunner kind of Ecumine, their whole city and stuff like that. So essentially the Flood, they kind of corrupted him, and he turned, and then eventually saw the errors of his ways, turned again, but all the damage was done. But he was essentially trying to help you through Halo 3, because he saw you as being like the Reclaimer and as being a way of setting right some of his errors. But it's the story itself is crazy, but he's a cool character. I was kind of hoping he wasn't really, really, really dead, but I think he might be. So again,
it's very it's one of those things that's up in the air, because a lot of people are thinking, because it's hard to find an alternative to this, but that he would be the reason the Spirit of Fire got to the Ark.
Yeah, I mean,
if not him, who else?
That's still never explained, which is a cool fact of like how at the end of start of Halo Wars 2, essentially Spirit of Fire in the middle of nowhere with no slipspace drive shows up, goes through a portal, somebody grabs it and takes it to the Ark. That would be cool. That would be a good explanation. Why not? There's fragments of this guy were split up everywhere. So who knows where it could crop up again. If anyway. So another one was
3 just has the funnest toy in their back pocket.
Of pulling this guy out.
Yeah, like they got like a golden Lego in their back pocket, and they're just like, I'm gonna save this.
Yeah. Hopefully they don't treat it like the GS ball.
Hopefully, oh god. Don't. How did you remind me of that? No.
Because you said golden Lego, and all I could think of was the GS ball.
Oh no. I totally forgot about that GS ball.
So did Pokemon.
Isn't even Halo. I know. This isn't Halo related.
Hopefully not.
No Pokemon.
Halo
Halo
Pokemon crossover.
Halo Go. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Oh boy.
Catch little Spartans out in the wild.
Well, you have Halo Go through xCloud.
Sure.
A little bit, yeah.
Sure.
We'll call it that way.
The last kind of two things I'll touch on pretty quickly. We had offensive bias, which was an AI created specifically to go after and attack Medicant bias, which it successfully did. It was an AI with not as much free reign given as Medicant was. It was built essentially just for this one purpose, and it did actually that purpose, and it defeated Medicant bias and the Flood, and also it pretty much triggered the healer rings. It was all around the same time. And that's how he did it. It was kind of cool, but that's his. I don't think where he kind of ends. I don't know if they ever really touch off what happened to his kind of story, but
They don't.
they don't really. Yeah. So I won't say too much more of that. And the very last one is one of the newest characters we met, which is a Warden Eternal. This is a cool character of what I pretty much dubbed like not dialect of Halo 5, of just like they had a great character in the dialect, but they tried to recreate that again, I felt, in the tone of the Warden Eternal. And he was a Forerunner artificial intelligence created as a protector of the domain. Cortana kicks his ass in a comic and gains access to the domain, which is it's pretty cool. And then he pretty much is like he's one AI which has like thousands of bodies, and essentially he pops up all over the game to kind of annoy you. And
sorry,
go for it.
I was going to say, it's also somewhat implied that he may have been a composed consciousness, because they talk about him, and at one point Exuberant Witness says, "Oh, he is not a robot."
Yeah. I got that too, that there's more to him than meets the eye than they've said.
Hopefully we might see something of that.
Yeah, I'm totally hoping he cropped up, because I was looking at the dates of like where he went, because I thought it's implied that Cortana destroyed his last body, but I think he shows up a day later somewhere else and attacks a human ship.
Yeah, he's still around. Like she shut him down at the end of the, what was it called? The level what was it called? Reunion? No, the breaking.
It might
the breaking. Be. Yeah, like when Blue Team confronts her. But that was just. I think that was at this point. It's obvious she was just trying to trap Blue Team, and especially John, Master Chief. But it's actually in Rossback's world. I think it is, or Rossbach's world, that they actually get reports of the Warden attacking, ships resisting Cortana's rule. So
yeah, cool. There we go. We know he's still out there, so
yes.
he's in Infinite. That's cool. And that's pretty much all I want to say about the Forerunner Attilas, because there's only about 2 or 3 that we may ever actually see again. Obviously, they've been heavily influenced the story up to now, but I've kind of loved them, and they're just seeing the differences. And obviously, the Great Bear trilogy brought a lot of that information to us, and obviously, his style of writing and concepts is, brain melting in terms of like he has very high level stuff in what he does, and goes in very detailed kind of sci-fi. So anyway, do you guys have anything to add about that? I mean, like, what more do you guys want from Forerunner AI? Or we'll probably talk a little bit more about Forerunner Tech in another episode.
I just want to see Mendicant Bias in Halo Infinite.
Yeah,
they're going to Installation 07. Come on,
he's got to be around. He's too good. I think he's too good to just write out the story.
I think it'd be interesting for him, and just to see where, like we said already, like where 343 goes, and just any other monitors. I feel like Exuberant Witness was a good addition. I think kind of creating more remnants of the Forerunners and kind of bringing them to the fold, and just learning more about them, I think is very easily added or able to be added as the lore expands. So.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. just in the interest of time, you can do it if you like. But we won't.
Yeah,
take too
I mean,
much longer.
essentially, so the Covenant did use AI, but they didn't really develop their own. They kind of copied some from human AIs, like captured human AIs, but that just didn't really, work out so well. Essentially, where the Covenant kind of beat the humanity in terms of like combat effectiveness, the humans kind of beat the Covenant over artificial intelligence and kind of had the one up in sort of that field. But that also had to do with that part of the Covenant's belief and the prophets. They essentially put a ban on the use of smart thinking AIs to be used as artificial intelligence because of the history of menacing bias ultimately succumbing to the flood and then starting the downfall of the Forerunners. And so they didn't want...
Seems now rightly so. You know?
Right, yes. I mean, to a degree, they have a point.
Prophet of Truth did nothing wrong.
Changed my mind. So it's interesting from that point of view of kind of why they don't have a reliance on AIs like the Forerunners and in humanity does. But where they do use AIs, or rather just some form of computer programming and artificial intelligence, is broken into sort of two fields. And so you have security AI and naval AI, and it's as simple as security AI being operating security systems and the operating of doors and locks and just the overall complexities involved with that, and then naval for intergalactic travel, much like our shipboard AIs for humanity. So it has some crossovers with dumb AIs, just in terms of the AIs are designed for very specific tasks and they're kind of closely monitored, as opposed to having smart AIs that free think and do all that kind of stuff for kind of the prophet's reasoning. And that's more or less everything in terms of the Covenant, but we felt that we would at least mention it.
There is one notable one, well, one or two that I did want to like. They don't have names, they're not treated as like individuals, but I thought it was really, really cool that the unnamed AI that was in Truth and Reconciliation, there's like a 343 Guilty Spark tries to like communicate to it and kind of fails because of like how it's built to communicate. But that AI actually wanted the flood to kill the Covenant so that it could be free. I thought that was cool. Yeah. I was like, yeah, man. I mean, go for it. I mean, why not? I mean,
there's actually an interesting parallel there, like with a type of Forerunner AI. You could almost say the engineers, the Huragok, but like they
we never really mentioned them.
Yeah, in one of the Halo Legendary crates, the ODST one from the first series, and probably the best one of the series in my opinion, they have the interview with the engineer from Halo 3 ODST, and essentially it breaks down to it kind of wants the Halo array to be activated in order so they can just kind of go back to being alone and doing what they do, not being interfered with by Covenant or humans or anything. It's like, I'm grossly oversimplifying it, but it reminds me of that. Yeah,
dynamic.
It's like these AI guys, just leave us alone.
We just want to go back to building shit and taking it apart. Leave us be.
I don't need to see your search history.
Yeah.
There's also a Covenant AI that's called like the Seek AI from the Isle of Bees, crazy ass AR. If you're into ARG, if you're into that kind of stuff, so that one was mental. I kind of read up on the story again, like just prepping for this, and I was like, I don't think we need to talk about this. It's too fucking crazy. There's time travel involved. There's all sorts of madness.
Yeah.
People who write this stuff are way smarter than me. But fair play to you. I guess in terms of the AIs, I mean, we don't expect to ever see anything else from the Covenant. I don't know going forward will they change, or like say the Covenant races now that the Covenant are gone. I don't think we probably will.
Yeah, or the individual species. I guess specifically the elites and the Sangheili, are they gonna all of a sudden change? Who's the same, but probably not.
Probably Huragok are their answer to like that gap.
Yeah.
In their base, but again, those guys are hard to come by even now.
Yep.
Okay. Back to you, Aaron. What you want to do from now? We're kind of almost finished up.
Yeah, we're almost finished up, and I mean we do have our little topic of how we think it relates to Infinite, but I think in this case it's one of those where it's like, well, AI is going to be really important with Halo Infinite, but we just don't really know. So I guess the big questions are, who defects and kind of joins Cortana, guys, specifically from the humanity aspect of it. Who kind of stays and fights alongside humanity and tries to rebuild, and who may be enticed by Cortana to kind of cure the rampancy and kind of have some sort of outlet of just infinite knowledge that she's kind of proposing. And then, like you said earlier, like how do you fight artificial intelligence? Like that's not just robots, because we kind of got some of that with Prometheans, if you want to really just simplify it.
Yeah.
These constructs that we're fighting against. So how do we kind of evolve over there? And that's really something that we can't quite answer just yet.
But there's one potential
but-
answer, I'll say, and this kind of goes into there's one type of AI y'all left out, and that's
Oh, really?
precursor AI. And we only have one.
Shit.
Yeah. So basically, for anyone who doesn't know, the precursors are transient beings that seeded life in the galaxy. They created humans, created forerunners. It's a lot of deep lore, but there's only one example of one of their AI, and that was this being called Abaddon or Abaddon, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But this thing was essentially how the precursor was this precursor AI that had some kind of deep connection to the domain. It was how early forerunners found the domain and learned to interact with it. And right after the Halo array was fired, which ended up damaging the domain, they had to go. This last group of forerunners had to go to the Forerunner capital and essentially reset this AI Abaddon in order to reset the domain. So maybe you go back to the Forerunner homeworld again, and while Abaddon isn't there, it's what would you call it? Like its casing is still there, and you could use that in some way to like the thing that gives these AI their edge is the domain right now. So it's not so much you have to fight the AI directly. You have to get them away from what gives them their power.
The domain.
Yep,
I
which
would
is the
love
domain.
the idea of going back to the Forerunner world.
Maythrillian is
Forerunner
such a
homeworld.
cool
Yeah.
place.
It
you know?
is.
Oh, the thoughts of going back there would be that's awesome. Yes, please.
And that's something that a lot of people are thinking might be hinted at in Shadows of Reach, circling all the way back to that. Is that because there might be coordinates to the Forerunner homeworld hidden deep in Reach? Who knows?
Who knows?
Hot diggity.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for pointing that out to us. I'm surprised that we kind of missed that. It's a good thing we had you on. You decided to join us.
Yeah, the deeper parts of the lore community have been like we like freaked out over that when Halo Fractures came out. It's like, oh, there's all this stuff coming together, man. Is that how Halo 6 is going to go? Because we still thought it was going to be Halo 6 at the time. So it was back in 2016. But yeah.
Well, great. I mean, is there any other sort of tidbits from here or there? I think we'll definitely learn a lot with Shadows of Reach and kind of see what we find underneath the rubble, and kind of how that affects our fight and against the Covenant, against the AIs.
Yep.
And then aside from that, I think it's just who knows what happens this summer in terms of the information we'll receive. So that kind of gives us a general understanding of the AIs, and we'll focus a little bit more specifically on Cortana and kind of her game plan and what we know, and maybe dive into a little bit more of who has kind of joined her to kind of get a better idea of us and leading up into Infinite as we get a little bit closer. But I think that about sums up this topic.
Thank you for joining us. Please visit our website, halopodcastdefault.com or Halo Podcast. Latest episodes, Halo release schedules, Discord, Facebook, Xbox Live communities, all that fun stuff.
Oh, what's our next lore episode? Did we talk about that?
Forerunner artifacts. Ooh,
Yes.
There's a lot to talk about there, but we're gonna kind of pick out some of our favorites to really delve into. So, if you're ready to have your mind blown, be ready. Forerunner artifacts are kind of crazy and
Be
kooky.
Ready.
Science. All right.
Magic.
That's all we got today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Ian, for coming. Go check out Halo Cannon. Not a cannon you shoot stuff out of. Unless he's shooting Halo at you.
He shoots
There you
Halo
go. Halo
lore into
t-shirts.
your brain.
It's just a
The Halo
cannon with
t-shirt
your
cannon.
with your logo like shooting out of it. There you go, merch idea.
Exactly.
But until next time, evolved.
Evolve.
Evolved.